A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, it is a period of cultural transformation. Park Chan-Wook sets about crafting a tale of deception, desire, and rage. At the center of this tale are two young women, Suki and Hideko, each trapped in different cages not of their making, and each desperate to find a greater fulfillment and freedom than the fate that men would condemn them to. What remains to be seen is how much they are willing to sacrifice in pursuit of that freedom. The Handmaiden contains depictions of sex, mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and violence, and may be triggering or otherwise inappropriate for some audiences. As this podcast is discussing the movie, it may likewise not be suitable for the same audiences. Hello there, and welcome back to 6 Degrees of Star Wars, the podcast where we explore all the ways George Lucas's flagship franchise surrounds us, binds us, and penetrates us in the landscape of cinema. I'm your host, Sam Marcioni. Joining me today is Ellie McConaughey.
Hello!
And Shamila Karanakran.
Hello!
And in reference to cleaning up our oopsie doodle from last time with Everything Everywhere All at Once, today we are actually following up on A Degree 5, a film done by a Star Wars crew member who is not George Lucas. In this case, a film that shares a cinematographer with the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, Chung Chung-hoon, The Handmaiden from 2016, made by Park Chan-Wook and based on the novel Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. And boy, this was a movie.
I love this movie. I actually love that book too, but man.
It is always interesting to see a novel that was originally in a Western language be translated into a non-Western setting, because so often we do it to them and they do it to us better, arguably.
It's one of those things because, like, the novel is originally set in England in, like, the Victorian period, because that's where Sarah Waters likes to write, like, you know, Victorian to World War II era stuff. And by putting it into 1930s Korea, this adds this whole element of, like, language and code switching that is just not there at all in the original novel.
And it's in a specific time period. The 1930s was specifically during Japanese occupation, so it also adds on a level of imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
My very first note was, no happy story ever starts with singing kids a cappella, and then I'm like, oh, marching soldiers, I'm exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was kind of pleasantly surprised by the ending, but we'll get into this. This ended up on my private letterboxd list of, I recognize that this film is good, but I kind of never want to see it again. So now we get to unpack my feelings about that so I can decide whether or not the Force is with this film.
I mean, I'm gonna tip my hand already on what I feel about this film. Like, I did my, like, top 10 movies of the 2010s, and it's one of, like, 5 movies that is, like, constantly rotating in the number 10 slot.
Shamila, I remember when I pulled this name off the list, you were super excited for it, so...
So, I originally knew this from Tumblr. There was this episode of a scene from The Handmaiden. It directly quotes from Fingersmith. Basically, the thief sees the heiress for the first time, and she goes, bloody hell, he should have told me she was so pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But then I really got into it when I was doing research to curate a list of female rage films centered on women of color. And fun fact, 2 of Park Chan-Wook's other films, like Sympathy for Lady Vengeance and Thirst, made it on that list. But you can also see this as a transformative adaptation, because the director took a story about 2 sapphic women fleeing from sexual exploitation, and by putting it in Japanese-occupied Korea, and making the main villain a Korean man masquerading as Japanese, who believes in the subjugation of his own country and people, and he forces his own Japanese niece to do the same to him, so he can be truly Japanese through her degradation. And through this kind of choice, we kind of get women fighting against both imperialism, fighting for women and fighting for imperialism. Those themes are intrinsically linked with each other.
It's slightly interesting to me that you had the uncle pegged as the villain, because for the majority of this movie, I had the Count pegged as the main villain, not the...
Both of them are.
Yes, both of them are the villain, but it's like the difference between Darth Maul the villain and Palpatine the villain. I'm not going to go into the Darth Vader comparison, because there's no Vader here. There's no hint of goodness buried in either of these men.
One of the adaptational changes that I find really interesting, and I don't remember the answer we got. Am I the only one who's read the original book?
I know the basic plot of it, and like all the spoilers.
I went into this with absolutely no information, because I kind of like that this podcast has been a process where I don't necessarily go into these new movies having any expectations, just pure, innocent nothingness. It's kind of beautiful.
So one of the things that I found really interesting, and the book, this is a very faithful adaptation right up until the point where Suki and Hideko team up. In the book, when Sue is the name of the thief, she gets committed to the asylum. That is an actual, like, betrayal. And
yes.
The entire final third is so different, like, it's basically a completely different product from there on out. Except that the Count dies, and they do end up together with the money. Those are the only things that are similar. But in the book, it's actually really heavily implied that the Count is gay and just is like trying to get. So I think, and he's also a little less overtly villainous. There is stuff going on that is outside of this plot that isn't included in this plot that makes him a little bit less bad. But also in the book, the heiress, Maud, is the one who kills him. So I find the change to make him more overtly villainous and at the same time make him more directly heterosexual a really interesting one, because I think that that's one of the things the movie is engaging with.
Welcome to Gay Wrath Month. I started out this movie trying to take notes, and then at the end of part 1, the note that I wrote was, wait, Jesus fuck, that was unexpected. And then the rest of my notes, 3 of them out of about 7, one of them goes, Jesus fuck, why has this movie swerved? What the fuck again? And then the last note I wrote is Jesus Christ, and I know what the last note is referring to. It's the goddamn octopus.
It's always the octopus. Like, it showed up in Oldboy as well. And there was there might have been a little bit of a thing there in, I think Beck said it was, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance.
There is one in Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. I think there's also one in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which would make sense because those 3 movies are like Oldboy,
connected.
Sympathy. Yeah, they're a thematic trilogy, so it makes sense that they have recurring elements. Here, I think it's a reference, like, they physically show it. It's a reference to the Dream of the Fisherman's Wife.
Yes.
God damn, that fucking hentai shit. Like, oh my god.
It makes it all the more satisfying when Suki and Hideko just go apeshit.
I loved that. I mean, my inner bookworm was dying slightly, but then I'm like, no, this is porn that a child was forced to read. Burn it all down.
Even more than it being like porn that a child is forced to read, I think that what makes that scene so great, and the scene where Suki and Hideko destroy all of the uncle's pornography, is the most romantic scene in the movie to me. It's just like this very direct, like, destroying the instruments of her abuse, and Suki coming down to saying like, oh, this was way more fucked up than I realized.
The film that this reminded me of is Glass Onion, but this is a million times better than Glass Onion because, not to get into my thoughts too deeply, but I hated the way that Glass Onion's big twist reveal in the second act was done, because it was presenting itself as a murder mystery that denied the audience the chance to be in on the murder mystery, quote-unquote, properly, because it withheld certain information. And in this situation, it's withholding information, but it's not a mystery, it's a thriller. And it's a tale of horror for the first 2 halves about these 2 women trying to escape and realizing who they are through their attempts to escape their cages of patriarchy. And then the ending section is the full revenge Thelma and Louise moment. And that was just so much more satisfying to me.
I've made it clear that I like Glass Onion, but I always love that device of we are going to retell the first half of this story from someone else's perspective.
It's the Rashomon effect.
Yeah, and I especially liked the use of repeated dialogue, like the way it gets brought back again and again. With Hideko's perspective, suddenly these words gain new meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's freaking amazing.
One of the things that I find, like, so we have not even started to do a plot summary at this point, have we?
Nope.
One of the things that I really vibe with about it, especially on repeat watches once you have all the information, is how much it becomes extremely clear that both Hideko and Suki are really bad liars, and the Count is just so dismissive of them as not only, like, people, but as, like, opponents, that he's not even noticing that they're fucking with him.
Mm-hmm.
Typical man.
And then we do have the scene where the Count says, like, women enjoy it most when they're being forced. And then Hideko, she knocks him out and delivers him to her uncle, saying that women enjoy most not being forced. So that was a real power move on her part.
Yep.
So I guess the heiress is actually theoretically the one to kill him in this one, just not directly.
Yes.
So
we should do a plot summary. We should do a plot summary so that the audience knows what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, so this movie follows a young pickpocket / con artist named Suki, though she's called
Tamako
Oju and Tamako for parts of the movie, because she is brought to the house of a Korean man who is, I guess, a weeb? You could...
I mean, that...
She didn't say it like that. He's a Japanese imperialist. That's what we're saying.
He's gone in hard on assimilation.
He was like a translator during the initial invasion and helped them and got like a gold mine out of it, so he's rich now. And
yeah.
He's doing that thing where he's like, I'm gonna make myself Japanese by copying the signs and signifiers. And a lot of it comes off really forced, but that's the point, I feel.
Especially with his language. This is like very, very formal in his Japanese. When Hideko says like he would never pass like an actual Japanese nobleman would never use such terms.
Mm-hmm. That is one of those things
right.
that's going to go over my head because I don't speak any Japanese.
Pulling back to synopsis, she is hired to be the handmaiden of his dead wife's niece. And then we go into flashback to reveal that she's actually there as the accomplice of a con man pretending to be a count who wants her to help him seduce the young lady, Hideko, with the intention of stealing her money, putting her in a madhouse, and then
running
Suki
off with her
can
fortune.
go and do whatever she wants.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the plan. Except then Suki and Hideko kind of start to fall in love for real. And then Suki's part of the story supposedly ends with the elopement going through, and then finding out that actually Hideko has known her for a fraud and she's getting sent to the madhouse in Hideko's place. And then we wind back and we see the story from Hideko's perspective. And she told the Count to get a patsy, essentially, to fall out this elaborate plan. But then, oops, she fell in love with Suki. And so the two women decided to conspire together to fuck over the Count who was trying to fuck both of them over. And the third part of the movie is them slowly managing to do exactly that. That is the very bare bones of the plot.
Yep.
Did I miss anything?
No, that's pretty much it.
Like the uncle is a guy who collects vintage, or I guess it's contemporary at the point, pornography, makes Hideko like
read it in front of an audience.
And also is like an abusive psychopath who murdered her aunt.
And he's plotting to marry his niece so he can obtain her fortune.
Yes.
Yeah.
To buy more porn.
Yep.
Just wait for the internet, my dude.
He's dying, and he dies this year. The internet's still like, what, 60 years off? He's not making it to the internet.
No.
God, I have to say, though, the uncle is so freaking creepy with his ink-stained mouth and tongue. The first time I saw it, I was like, what the fuck?
I think Park Chan-Wook, who directed this, he is capable of some really complex, subtle filmmaking and characterizing a lot of the time. Stoker and Decision to Leave are really great examples of that. If you ever want to see either of those, Decision to Leave is incredible. I do like that with the uncle. He's like, nope, we are gonna let you know the second you see this motherfucker that he's a villain.
I mean, it works, but god damn. I did spend the first half of this movie going, eat the rich, eat the rich, eat the rich.
I do think that the film is concerned with, like, money as a motivator, but not, like, when you compare it to... So Park Chan-Wook often gets compared to another South Korean filmmaker who basically sprung up around the same time, which is Bong Joon-ho. And
of course.
Parasite.
Bong Joon-ho is not just Parasite, all of them. Bong Joon-ho is incredibly concerned with capitalism. It is, if you had to, all the way back to Dead Dogs Don't Bite, I think the title of his first film is, which is not a very good movie, which is why I don't know the title of it off the top of my head. But capitalism is the primary unifying theme of all of his movies, just, like, engagement with that. Whereas I think Park Chan-Wook is not at, like, obviously that's a concern because we all exist in capitalism, so it's going to influence your movie. But Park Chan-Wook is less interested in that as his main subject. In this case, I think it's more about patriarchy and how social, not even so, like, how imperialism affects the way cultures see themselves are his primary concerns here. Because, like, every single character, all of the main characters are on some level or another performing all of the time.
Especially, like, it also draws in with language, especially with the switching between Japanese and Korean.
I mean, I don't know any Japanese or Korean, so I was completely lost of when the dialogue switched between the two of them, and I kind of wish that the subtitles on the DVD copy I had would have, like, had some kind of delineation for when they were speaking one language versus the other.
But you can see it as Japanese presenting as, like, alienation, very formal. And then Korean is a bit more intimate, and that's how like Suki and Hideko's relationship go. They start out very formal with Hideko being called Ojo-sama, which is basically young lady in Japanese, and then it ends with Hideko calling Suki Suki, which is like an affectionate term.
Well, in the theatrical version, and also in the version they have on Amazon Prime, I don't know if my DVD copy has. I wanted the Blu-ray, but it was in print for like 3 minutes. They do delineate. The Japanese Korean is in white, and Japanese is in yellow.
Okay.
They will often switch, like, especially during the final scene when the uncle is killing the count. He will switch what language he's speaking mid-sentence. Yeah, that's the copy I have of The Handmaiden, which was I found at a library someplace.
I got this copy from a library, but everything on this one, it was all white subtitles.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of language, there's also even within the subtitles itself, there's stuff that doesn't necessarily translate well. Like in part 2, when Hideko starts describing Suki, it's subtitled in English as "My savior who came to ruin my life, my Tamako, my Suki." But if you were to follow it in Korean syntax, it would be transliterated as "the person who came to ruin my life, my savior, my Tamako, my Suki." Tamako would be the person who came to ruin her life, while Suki is her savior. I don't think that would have come across as well in English.
Again, yeah, that's just one of those things where you're gonna have to roll with the translation issues because it's a very different language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will say we've been kind of dancing around it so far, and I feel like we should get it out of the way early. So this film is very well known in some circles for some very specific scenes.
Yes.
I need to look this up now. Did they have an intimacy coordinator
Oh,
on
yeah.
set?
I have it here. Okay. They said we had all the male members of the crew leave the set, and we would only use a remote hand to remotely control the camera. We hired a female room operator. We set up a private room for the actors so they could take a rest between suits. It would be dimly lit, and have candles and wines and snacks so they can relax and take time out and need to. They would only do 1 or 2 takes.
The director wasn't on set, like he was directing over the phone.
Exactly. There was only one female member, like in present during the room during these scenes.
That just feels like such a stark contrast from some of the horror stories you hear.
I know that should be the golden standard to follow. And he actually Park Chan-Wook wanted to frame the reading scenes where like Hideko is reading pornography to like all the rich clients and all the uncles as like what the violence of the male gaze can do. So like even if Hideko was wearing layers and layers of kimono, it wouldn't have mattered because when she was reading to this audience, she might as well have been exposed, and even though they are standing meters away from her, they're still violating
with
her.
The puppet.
Yeah.
The fucking bit with the puppet.
Well, the puppet scene's such a good, like, it's a really blunt visual metaphor, but especially when you combine it with the way that she's made up, like, she is made up like that doll she carries around as a kid. And I it's just one of those things where I don't want to, this is one of those things where it's hard to say. I can very easily see a director just sort of slumping into making shooting these scenes in like a sexy way, shooting the reading scenes. Like you hire hot guys, you maybe visualize the scenes. These scenes are some of the least sexy scenes in the entire movie.
This is a scene that Paul Verhoeven would actually ruin.
Yeah. He could never.
I just, it's one of those things where like, I feel like what I love about Park Chan-Wook is he will put more effort into two people sitting in an empty interrogation room talking to each other than most directors put into like climactic action scenes.
One of the things that was super interesting to me was that in the sex scenes, for the most part, we didn't see nipples. And thus, the movie is theoretically Tumblr safe, but then there were other scenes where we did clearly see female presenting nipples.
You're allowed to put nipples back on Tumblr again.
Yeah.
Oh God.
The porn is back.
Unfortunately.
See, I've been away from Tumblr so long, I don't keep up with what is or isn't allowed anymore, but still, I'm always a little weird about nipples on screen. Not because, like, I'm weirded out by nipples or anything, but to me it's always kind of indicative of how a director's gaze is actually working by how they focus on the nipples.
One of the things I find really interesting, and several other people have pointed this out, is that, okay, so you, as a presumed straight male audience member, want to see these girls naked, right? That's just like, let's not beat around the bush, so to speak. That's just the way it is. If you want to see them, the scenes, all of the scenes where you actually get to see anything, where there's any sort of eroticism, are POV from either Suki or Hideko. You have to identify with these girls if you want to engage with it, because all of the scenes where it's just like the count is in the scene or the uncle, completely unsexy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like some sickos probably get something out of like the 69 shot in Hideko's section of the film in part 2. But, like, in the ending shot when they're passing the bells back and forth in their mouth, it's like, okay, I'm happy for you guys. This might be my inner ace talking, but I was like, this is kind of weird.
I mean,
there's actually...
Not to kink shame, but it felt like a very odd and unintimate moment for what they were celebrating.
Well, I think you would have to understand more of the context about it. Like,
I mean, I understand it was some kind... I remember it was referenced in one of the earlier scenes that's something Hideko was reading.
Yeah.
That talked about, like, the intimacy. But I also was remembering, like, that scene of her having a metal sphere in her mouth while her hand was beaten. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like it would be something she likes.
You could probably see it as reclaiming from it, because, like, even though, like, she's so desensitized from it for trauma, but with the silver bells piece, like, it's clearly a favorite for her. It's like, even when the lights go out, keeps reciting it, she keeps memorizing it, and then when she's intimate with Suki, she performs some of these actions that are specifically mentioned in that text, and you can sort of seeing it as, like, the bell scene at the end as sort of reenacting a fantasy. And it's like, it's a metaphor for, like, Hideko freeing herself from abuse, and...
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I agree with your interpretation there, and I do feel like... So, I don't know if this makes me, like, an iconoclast in this call. I know that there are different groups of film people who will agree or disagree with me on this. I'm not opposed to sex scenes in film. I'm not even necessarily opposed to pointless sex scenes in film. Aesthetic goals are acceptable goals sometimes. But I will say that I do feel like all of the sex scenes in this movie are extremely motivated, and I do feel like the movie did need to end on a sex scene or something like it, because this is the moment of intimacy where they aren't performing at all for anyone anymore. Because even in the first time they have sex, they are still, on some level or another, performing what they think their roles in the con are. So I do feel like showing that they are still intimate, like that this is for each other rather than for the con. Yeah. And again, there's never a scene where they, like, get it on in front of someone else or where anything erotic happens when they're with other characters. You have to identify with these people. I mean, look at the first half with Suki's point of view. Most of it is directly from her POV. The bath scene, the bedroom scene, all that. It is, I will admit to the audience, though, it is an extremely sexually explicit movie, so if you don't vibe with that, you probably aren't going to like it.
Yeah.
I think I saw this, like, on a list it wasn't correlated to Black Swan, because the list was something of, if you like X American or English language film, try Y non-English language film. And so, of course, it was Black Swan, Perfect Blue, but then The Handmaiden was, like, right under Black Swan, and this does kind of have that same vibe for me for Black Swan, not in terms of, like, similarities in plot, but just, like, this kind of violent awakening to what you really are, especially with Hideko, because she has that recurring issue with the Count of, there's no desire in your eyes, you're like a corpse, you're dead, you're limp, and then we see how much she comes alive with Suki.
It's not just a sexy movie, it is quite a romantic movie a lot of the time, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I mean, the scene where she and the Count are both drawing Suki, and he's got, like, the more technically perfect and pretty looking portraits, and then she looks like hers looks like a 5-year-old's drawing, and yet it's so much more intimate.
Yeah.
It was kind of fucked up to me that the funniest scene in the movie is the scene where Hideko attempts suicide, and Suki is under her holding her up.
And then stops holding her
and
up.
Holding her up because she gets so angry and she starts cursing.
It's so fucking... And Hideko's like, ah! And Suki's like, oh my god, sorry.
I probably shouldn't have laughed so much at that scene, but it was hilarious. Like, any time where Suki...
That's like the ultimate gallows humor.
Yeah.
I mean, the climax, the end of the romance in his next movie and Decision to Leave, it's one of those movies that is incredibly fun. Like, a lot of the stuff is just incredibly funny sometimes, but also extremely dark and extremely, he's one of those David Cronenberg directors that I like, where he's just every so often like, what if it was fucked up? And you need people like that. You need people like out there going like, what if I made it fucked up? Huh? I take it Sam does not agree, but you know.
I have a very weird scale for what is or isn't fucked up. I mean, I'm dreading when Freddy Got Fingered gets pulled up, but at the same time, I'm very much looking forward to inflicting my misery on everyone else when we do Dario Argento's Phantom of the Opera.
That movie's just unpleasant. Same thing with Freddy Got Fingered. Like, as fucked up as this movie is, I have
it's good.
I have this scale that I sort of bust out sometimes. I'm like, here is how fucked up this movie is, and here's how much I get out of it. And you gotta like maintain that balance, because if I'm not getting, if it's more fucked up than I'm getting out of it, I'm just not gonna like it.
For context, other movies on the I recognize this is a good movie, but I'm not sure I ever want to watch it again, those also include The Worst Person in the World and Tar. So,
Worst Person in the World? What an odd pick. I love that movie.
I think it hit me that one hit me a little too hard in terms of relatability and triggered a mini existential crisis.
It'll do that.
I don't think I want to watch this anymore. I don't think I was trying to be cultured and now I'm just sad.
The director of that's previous movie is Thelma, which is one of my it was one of my main comfort movies. And if this tells you about my taste, it is a sapphic horror romance. So
yeah, that sounds like you.
Don't ever take what I like as like a recommendation. I like weird shit.
This movie.
I was thinking about it like literally as we were talking. I might have been stalling so I could think about it. I do think that like Park Chan-wook's South Korea's relationship with other countries is a very big preoccupation for him, and that comes up a lot here because South Korea is just in a weird spot in the world politics, and I think he's sort of, I think it's one of those things where like every artist creating under that is going to have it in their brain even if they don't engage with it, but I think he's very interested in engaging with South Korea's relationship with China and Japan. And
I mean, it's telling that they decide we're going to China at the end of the story instead of where was Russia?
Vladivostok, yeah.
Yeah, in Russia, but the fact that they go to Shanghai concerns me a little because, like, coming up in several years, there's gonna be the Sino-Japanese War, and with Hideko, like, I'm hoping that she either passes herself off as a Korean or they go someplace else because that's not going to end well for them.
They both had Korean passports, didn't they?
They did, but
Korean names on their passports.
They would, but if anyone finds out, then
that's sort of like one of the other art things that I found really interesting about this movie, because I feel like my understanding of racial relations between Japan and the rest of East Asia is that they are not super positive.
No, it's a lot of like colonialism and like nationalism involved, and there were a lot of like war crimes, especially with from like Japanese soldiers against women from those other countries.
Avatar: The Last Airbender like had to tone down the level of Japanese influences on the Fire Nation because of the level of atrocities Imperial Japan did.
Exactly.
Right, and that's sort of one of the things that I found really interesting is, there's this bit right at the beginning where Suki is meeting, or is like pretending to meet the Count for the first time at the house, and he has like some line about good bone structure for a Korean, but like they can just pass each other off as Korean or Japanese or Chinese as they need to in the movie. And I think that was sort of like gauging a little bit with how arbitrary a lot of these distinctions are, and how those things are like weird and damaging to the people under them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the scene where the two of them are both dressing up, like, it was partially that I didn't have my glasses on and there was a little glare on my screen. I was like, wait, okay, it's Hideko in the white dress and Suki is in the blue dress, because they do look very similar if the light is hitting them a certain way.
Well, you have to also consider the fact that technically it's a Korean actress who's playing Hideko. So I think that those kind of differences are still arbitrary.
They are supposed to hypothetically look very similar. In the original book, the fact that they looked similar was actually like a plot point. or like 3 times over in increasingly weird ways. The third act of that book gets real soap opera-y.
Yeah, the children switched at birth.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. Fucking England, man. God damn it, England.
Which I'm kind of glad that the Handmaiden didn't do this part, because this was being so convoluted.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I guess that kind of makes the line about the babies that are being raised in Suki's little Oliver Twist-esque orphan hangout, that they're being raised to be adopted by Japanese noble families. I guess that's kind of like a reference to that.
I mean,
yeah.
The entire third act of the book takes place at the even more Oliver Twisty hideout, and alternately at the madhouse where Sue, I think is the name of the con woman in that book, is trying to break out of. But also, like, part of me wonders if they changed it because they had different story to tell, or if their original reason for changing is like, Jesus Christ, this is another 45 minutes on top of this movie.
It could have been a bit of both.
Could be a bit of both. You know,
No, could be.
So I do think that the movie is engaging a lot with. The movie is engaging with a lot of things. It's engaging with, you know, the way racism is in East Asia. It's engaging with classism. It's engaging with gays and pornography, and how I think that it's engaging with it both, and how it can be damaging, but also about how, like, you can choose if it's engaged with intentionally rather than forced on you, but can be empowering. Like, it's complicated. It's a complicated movie.
It really is.
Yeah. I think it's a necessary movie, but it's also a hard movie to watch, because it deals with such explicit themes that are really hard to, like, process.
Mm-hmm. And
yeah, I mean,
I would be curious to hear what you thought about this movie, like 3 months down the line, once you've chewed on it. Like, how long ago did you watch it?
This morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have not processed it at all.
You've had like 3 hours to chew on it. I will say, unfortunately, so I have this rule that I have, or this like instinct that I have when I've seen a lesbian sex scene in a movie. I can tell instantly, was this directed by a man or a woman? I can tell instantly. There's two movies fooled me, kind of. The first one, back in 2008, when I first came up with this, like, man, I thought Bound was directed by a woman. What's going on there?
True. Yeah.
I mean, you were right.
Yeah, you were right.
The second one is Carol, which Carol's directed by a gay man, so that might have thrown me off. But you can very much tell that this movie the sex scene was directed by a man. It's directed by an immensely talented man. I mean, some of the fucking edits in this movie alone. That one time when they like cut from Suki's portrait to Suki in the same shot, God, it rules.
That was
I
really liked the shot where like there was mist or clouds or something, and then it cut to the wine glass being filled.
Mm-hmm.
It in the fire scene, that was fucking beautiful.
Yep. Or like I liked, they pan over to see Hideko looking through a peephole, and when the Count is having sex with one of her servants, and they pan back, and it's several days later when Suki is arriving. Like, those are great edits.
Yeah.
Fucking beautiful. And God damn, this didn't even get the Oscars are bullshit.
I don't think South Korea put it up.
This did win the best film not in the English language
for the BAFTAs. Yeah.
Yeah, South Korea has the worst taste in movies to put up.
Unfortunately.
I mean, I say that, but also, like,
Parasite
was a big hit in itself.
Parasite was a good pick. They did put up Decision to Leave last time around. I don't know. I have this theory. I'm not even going to say it's a theory. I'm just going to say it out loud. Like, France didn't put up Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Norway didn't put up Thelma. Like, starting to notice a pattern here, guys.
Just like how there's a pattern with all the lesbian shows getting canceled and pulled off the streaming.
Fucking Grease. I don't even like Grease, and I was like, maybe I'll watch it, and then it's just gone.
And the same thing happened with First Kill.
Willow.
League of Their Own's getting canceled.
Oh, no.
It's getting 4 episodes to...
That's not enough.
Yeah, but so that's like saying...
I know.
I
know it's not
the
enough.
official line is that the Owl House didn't get canceled because of the sapphic couple, but come on.
I did find it extremely funny when they like put it up on streaming and suddenly it had huge views and they're like, oh, maybe we shouldn't
we fucked up.
Maybe we shouldn't have canceled this.
The moral of the story is to support your local lesbians, your local sapphics. I'm sorry that I keep saying lesbian when I mean sapphic.
It's all right. We got a bunch of really good ones, really good sapphic movies coming out this year. One of the Coen brothers has a sapphic movie coming out this year.
What's the one that Ruby Cruz is in?
Bottoms.
Yeah, that I'm looking forward to that one.
Oh yeah.
The woman who directed it did Shiva Baby a couple years ago, which is a great film. If you want to be incredibly anxious for an hour and a half.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but Bottoms is giving me major 80s vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you love that?
We didn't get any gay sex comedies when sex comedies were big, so we are owed them.
Maybe it's do people think that sapphics aren't funny?
They can't possibly think that. Half the best sapphics in the world are some variety of comedian. Gillian Anderson's really funny.
When was the last time you saw Kate McKinnon play something actually gay? And don't say Barbie.
I haven't seen Barbie yet. Maybe Barbie.
I'm regretting now that I had a long week and I did not get around to watching this, and then I realized it was tomorrow. Yesterday I realized today was I'm like, fuck, I gotta watch it this morning.
That is more or less exactly what happened to me. I finished watching it like a couple hours ago.
Yeah, but you've seen it before.
I have seen it several times before.
I've seen it before. Yeah, it was actually one of the few movies I could actually follow because there were subtitles.
Okay, so maybe I was like overthinking this and I thought like the butterfly pin was going to be like more symbolism rather than a Chekhov's gun, and I also thought that the shoes and the gloves, I don't know, maybe I'm just so dense that I thought there would be more symbolism in them, but did I miss the symbolism?
Not necessarily. I mean, they did have a thing about like shoes here. Basically, you know, with yeah, even Hideko carrying new pair of shoes after Suki's own shoes were stolen. But then on the route to Shanghai, Hideko kneels and ties Suki's shoes, showing that they're free from their social classes. So there's symbolism in that.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm used to symbolism being more like a recurring thing. Like, for an example, like, if you watched Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, it's like playing Spot the Moth in every scene.
Mm-hmm.
But that's Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
That's a completely different way of doing things.
Guillermo del Toro is a very lovely director, genuinely one of the best, but also he is a dude who not only has basically half his movies be like the monster isn't the actual monster, but then he has something really fucked up happen to the person who's actually a monster, so that we can be like, hey, his inner monstrousness is shows up on his body now.
It's over the top. That's what we're saying.
Guillermo.
Guillermo. I love it. You know, subtlety is sometimes overrated.
Yeah, it's just depending on how the fucking up manifests, that can lead into ableism. But
I don't think he's ever gone with that.
I guess I thought like the shoes thing was gonna be a more recurring thing.
I think the more recurring thing is actually doors, because, like, something that Park Chan-Wook said, he says that doors were supposed to represent social class in the movie. Like, in, part one, Suki is opening the door for Hideko because she's her maid, and then, like, at the end of part one, and after leaving the library, the both of them are opening the door together. And then, when we get to the end of part 3, we have Hideko opening the door for Suki. So,
there was some phenomenal shot framing of, like, panels and posts and barriers between the two of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those were gorgeous.
Windows. they do make a thing out of the shoes. I was gonna make a joke that, like, I don't know, maybe he idolizes Quentin Tarantino.
No, don't say that. It's cursed.
Don't say that.
Sorry. I'm not sorry.
Get in the tank with the octopus.
No.
The gloves were super interesting, though, like, because it feels like there's so rarely scenes when Hideko is without them.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of represent how, again, it's the visual symbolism for Hideko, I feel, is that she's kind of a doll. Like, she is dressed the way other people want her to dress. She moves the way other people want her to move.
She can't interact with things the way she wants to, hence the gloves.
Mm-hmm. And, like, you can see that in the scene where she and Suki undress each other, where Suki gets to actually, like, physically touch her, but Hideko has to do it through gloves. And that is one of the reasons why I feel like, it's one of the reasons why I feel like the sex scene is important, because it is a moment where she gets to touch the way she wants to. But I also think that's why it's important that she is the one who dresses up as a guy when they're fleeing to Shanghai.
And also, like, she puts on gloves after Suki gets taken into the madhouse.
Right, because she's still playing, like, she's still dressing up the way other people want her to dress up. She's still
in that role.
She's still playing a part.
Yeah.
You know, it occurs to me the other thing her the way she's dressed when she's doing the readings is visually reminiscent of is like kabuki theater.
Yeah.
So it's very much about, like, playing parts, playing roles, doing what's expected of you.
I mean, I haven't really seen a lot of kabuki theater, so I can't confirm my opinions on that. But I mean, even being somebody like me who did spend a lot of time on Tumblr when Frozen was super popular, and people were like, OMG, Elsa and Hans both wear gloves because they have stuff they need to hide.
I mean, that is perfectly valid. You know, that
baby symbolism. At least it's a step above the curtains were fucking blue.
You know, we make fun of that, but, like, I don't know, a good blunt visual metaphor works sometimes. It is worthwhile to. I'm making another. You know, I mentioned kabuki theater, and one of the directors, a director that I've actually talked with you about, Sam, here on this here podcast. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love about Kurosawa's directing is his physical acting. It's so over the top. It is so reminiscent of kabuki theater. You know, someone doesn't like cover their face when they're ashamed. They drop to their knees and collapse. You know, someone who's angry, like something, they'll, like, stand up and, you know, get physical. I like that stuff because it makes it a lot easier to understand what you're going for. And therefore, if you have moments where you want to be ambiguous, it makes that more obvious, and it forces you to engage with the stuff that's ambiguous if you don't have to engage with the stuff that isn't. And I like movies that are, like, subtle and ambiguous. You know, I like Cronenberg and Lynch and all that. But, you know, I think that there's a place for extremely blunt, extremely on the nose visual symbolism.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with you there.
You know, the butterfly symbol rebirth.
Yeah.
Does it? I hadn't known.
Well, you can say that Suki escaping the asylum and, like, running off with Hideko with their bags full of, like, Hideko's fortune. That's a rebirth in itself.
I mean, it's an extraordinarily literal rebirth. By the time they're on the ship to Shanghai, both of them have IDs that don't have their names on them.
Wait, doesn't Suki go with her name, though?
Suki...
No, the point is that, like, Suki doesn't even know how to read or write her own name. That's how she got trapped in the asylum in the first place.
No, Hideko has Suki's name at that point. Like, she has a passport that has Suki's name on it. Or no, she has...
But wait, Hideko was the one in drag.
Yeah. I don't know then. Maybe I'm wrong. Women in suits, man. Women in suits.
I'll send you some Michelle Yeoh in a suit after this.
So what do you have anything else you want to discuss about it?
I'm trying to think. I don't know. My brain keeps going back to that goddamn octopus.
I mean, the octopus doesn't really do anything. It's just kind of there. On screen, at least.
Yeah, it's just, I wasn't expecting it, and, the implication that it's there next to, like, the petrified reproductive organs and other pieces of... Like,
no,
what
he's
did he make the
practically
octopus
recreating
do
it.
to Hideko?
Yeah, and no wonder, like if he had tried to do that, no wonder, like, she was terrified to go in the basement. Like, she would rather have died than go down there.
I will say, the way that the Count kills the uncle and himself in order to escape, like, the torture, that was pretty metal. That was pretty fucking metal.
That was pretty metal, especially because you kind of realize he must have clocked that as he was sitting in the car, since he took out all his non-mercury cigarettes.
I think that was, like, him... He took out all his non-mercury cigarettes, but I did kind of read that a little bit as him, like... taking the risk, like, I think you can see it in the scene, like, they roll down the windows, so he realized, like, I couldn't do this here and be certain I was gonna, I'd accomplish my actual goal, which is not have to deal with this. I do find it super interesting. Ian Danskin mentioned this. All three of the narrator characters, Hideko, Suki, and the Count, do at one point, like, basically tell a little story about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the Count's is the only one that is diegetic, like, is a story he's telling to someone else. And it's also the only one that's just complete made-up bullshit.
So it's an interesting part, because the actor for the Count's actor said that whenever he's lying, he speaks in Japanese, but whenever he's telling the truth, that's Korean. But when you take a look at the film itself, like, I'm not really sure if it's actually true or if he's just, like, trying to throw us off on purpose. But I don't think there's a moment there where he's actually truthful. Or maybe he kind of feels like he's lying to himself, like, especially at the end.
Maybe.
I don't think... I mean, he knows that he didn't do anything with Hideko. So I think he's just, like, lying to the uncle to get him to give him his cigarettes, to give him his mercury cigarettes.
Exactly.
He's the Count's a...
I do...
Go ahead.
I do appreciate movies when it's, like, telling a blatant lie juxtaposed with the reality. That's one of my favorite kinds of cutaway situations.
I find the Count kind of, like, interesting as a character because he's clearly the villain. He and the uncle are, like, the villains of the piece. But what's interesting is that he gets basically the third chunk of the movie is basically devoted to him, and a little bit of that is like, well, we need to get to his POV to see the plot wrap up. Like, to get these girls to the happy ending, they have to no longer be pursued by the uncle. And also, just on a general level, the uncle should probably eat shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, the one... That death is metal as hell. It's just, I wish the uncle could have suffered more. I would have liked the uncle's dick to get chopped off or something.
Yes.
He had it coming. And part of me also wanted to see all the guys there get a little bit of comeuppance, but that's just, like, that would be too much to ask for in a movie that, you need, like, Kill Bill levels of stuff happening to get that to work.
Stop bringing Tarantino into this space!
It's more like Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. You want Sympathy for Lady Vengeance levels.
Okay, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance is a better comparison, yeah. I don't even like Kill Bill. I don't know if that's a hot take. But
I haven't even watched any of it.
I think that the point of the Count is partially to give us a villain who is more on screen than, like, the uncle is screen time is very, very limited, and he's
hidden.
He is. He's, like, looming over the entire... Man, part of me really wants to try to examine the fact that the house built in Korea is half English, half Japanese. It's like, what is happening?
So it's just
here?
colonization on colonization. Oh my god.
I mean, I don't think that it's either my place or Park Chan-Wook's place to engage with this that directly, but like there is an interesting element about how a lot of, Japan was basically a closed off island for most of the 17 and 1800s, and then the US basically comes in, pounds on the doors like, hey guys, you're opening up the country now, to steal a joke from the history of Japan, open the country, stop having it be closed. And then they basically started. I mean, after they had a couple civil wars, it was a bit of a mess for a while. After that, they basically started. After they had been colonized by Europe, after Europe had basically said, like, "Hey, we've seen the way you're running your government. We want you to have a different one." Okay. They basically then started reproducing that across the rest of East Asia, and I find that really interesting. But I don't think that's a theme that Park Chan-Wook can really engage with, and I don't think it's one I can engage with either.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's one I can engage with it. I'm too pasty for that.
Exactly, that's my point.
Well, it's definitely someone who is like deeply engaged in like the colonialism and nationalism, like actually acknowledging that, because even in like Japanese school system, they do not acknowledge this part of their history at all.
Right, like one of my favorite Japanese authors engages pretty regularly with Japan's military ventures across the in East Asia, Haruki Murakami, and he always portrays them as these like long, violent, and pointless endeavors. And I'm not super familiar with like Japanese critics because they mostly write in Japanese. So I'm curious. I'd be curious to find out if the sequence in the Wind Up Bird Chronicles where you get a flashback to the war in Manchuria where nothing is accomplished and basically everyone dies, if that was like controversial, like actually putting that on the page, acknowledging that it happened and that it was awful.
But that would also require like the West knowing about this as well. Like I don't know if you two have seen Kim's Convenience.
A little bit.
I know of it, but I think it started picking up like after I canceled my Netflix. So
So it's a Canadian show about a Korean immigrant family, and the character Mr. Kim, he's always saying that I forget the year. I think it's 1930. Japan attacked Korea. That's sort of like a catchphrase of his. But since he's like South Korean and everything, he's probably had family who lived through that time period, and it was devastating. So you could probably see it as a joke, but to him, it's an awful piece of history that he's had to live with.
Revisionist history being written by the victors is always, something that the victors are reluctant to engage in when they realize there's no good way to paint us in all of this. Mm-hmm. Or then you get like a Taylor Sheridan asshole claiming credit for all the work that Indigenous women did to get the Violence Against Women Act passed.
Yeah.
We don't talk about
fuck Taylor Sheridan.
We don't talk about Taylor Sheridan because his movies aren't very good, and we're talking about a good movie right now. I do find it interesting, and I don't know if this is just like a happenstance of its release or the fact that like supposedly David Bowie loved it a lot. I do find it interesting that of all of Sarah Waters' works, Fingersmith is the one that's gotten adapted the most. It got adapted to a TV show. It got adapted.
Oh yeah, the miniseries.
It got adapted into a play at one point. Of her other books, Tipping the Velvet is very.
Oh yeah, I've seen
loose.
I've heard about that one.
It's a very famous book. Like both of these books were like they came out at the point where like the only lesbian novels were like those two, like some Rita Mae Brown books and Annie on My Mind. Like back at that point, if it was a gay book, all the gays knew it, And Stone Butch Blues, everyone liked Stone Butch Blues. So it's interesting that, you know, Tipping the Velvet is very, very loose. It doesn't have a lot of plot. It's kind of like the tales of being a lesbian in like 1800s England. But most of the rest of her books, including this one, I would say, they're very horror influenced. Like the very long segment at the end of the book where Sue is stuck in the madhouse is basically a horror sequence.
Yeah.
And a lot of her other books are either directly or indirectly just horror novels.
Considering that Sarah Waters, she actually liked the script for The Handmaiden, so there could be some like weight to that.
I do find it interesting that like Park Chan-Wook, who is known for directing very overtly horrific stuff, you know, Old Boy is very horrific. The
Thirst is horrific.
Thirst is a horror movie. Stoker is a horror movie. He cut out of the part of the book like there is like 90 seconds spent in the insane asylum in this movie. She's like committed there. She has like 5 seconds of the shot of her eating there and realizing this place fucking sucks, and then she escapes, and that's it. And so I find it interesting that is the part that got completely excised, basically.
I guess Park Chan-Wook realized, I don't need to torture porn my gaze,
yes,
and I don't need to bury my gaze. Well done. I mean, there was torture porn, but it was mostly psychological.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting, like, Park Chan-Wook can have some overtly horrific, like the hammer fight sequence in Old Boy is one of the most bloodiest fight scenes in like moviedom.
Yeah.
But I don't think he ever really dips into like torture porn type stuff, even when he's being horrific. Like there's like one to two on-screen murders in all of Stoker, and I think one of them basically takes place in Wide Shot.
Yeah,
I think he's much more interested in psychological horror when he's doing horror stuff, and I think he's got a very loose engagement with genre. I can't speak to what like genre consists of in South Korea, so maybe he's just like doing South Korean genres.
Genre is just a retroactive thing
that
we made up to categorize shit.
And you cannot categorize this.
Right. Well, I don't know what I would categorize as that. Do I say it's a psychological thriller? Do I say it's a romance? Do I say it's an erotic thriller?
Revenge film?
Revenge thriller. You know, what am I going to call it? It's a movie. It's a good movie.
I mean, I guess I'd call it a psychodrama, but...
Psychohistorical drama. Focusing on female rage.
Everybody likes some female rage.
Exactly, that's why I put it on the list.
I think we're ready. Is the Force with it? Ellie?
God, yes.
Shamila?
Yes.
I'm still teetering on the fence, but in the spirit of Gay Wrath Month, I will bow. I will say it is unanimous. The Force is with it. Only a Sith deals in absolutes, but today I'm glad to be on the dark side.
It is, if it helps tip it over, it is the source of one of like the top 3 best Letterboxd reviews of all time, which is lesbians scamming men and staying together is my favorite genre.
Yes.
Can't argue with that. All right. Do either of you have anything you want to plug?
You can find me on Tumblr at s4karuna@tumblr.com. I'm known there for my lists of various media, including female rage films, Black women in period films, and Indigenous women in period films. And there's also, for Pride Month, the latest one is a list of Girls Love series.
Nice. Is your GoFundMe still running?
Yes.
All right, so we'll link to that too. Ellie?
You can find me on Twitter at LSR42. Find me on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos, with dashes in between the words, just in case that's unclear. I do theoretically have a podcast where we're still waiting to record the second episode. Back to High School, where me and my friend and music critic Katie will be reviewing every episode of the TV show High School and the Tegan and Sarah album from which it gets its song title. And I have a Medium page. It's LSR42. I'm posting there more often. I'm working on a write-up about Asteroid City right now.
Mm-hmm. And you can check out my YouTube channel, La Femme Fictionale, for feminist media critiques. Find me on Patreon, Twitter, and Instagram at Femme Fictionale, and on TikTok at FictionaleFemme. Our theme music is provided by Refractory Period, the 2 girls, 1 beat synth-pop sensation. You can follow them on Instagram at Refractory Period the band. To support this podcast, please subscribe to us on your platform of choice, leave reviews, and share with your friends to boost our visibility. And now, it's time to turn to the Chance Cube, so let's refresh ourselves on our categories. Degree 1.
non-Star Wars, but still made by George Lucas or Lucasfilm. Degree 2, stars one of the main trio from a trilogy or the lead of a show or standalone series. Degree 3, stars a supporting cast member from multiple projects. Degree 4, stars a supporting cast member from one movie or project. Degree 5, made by a Star Wars crew or creative team member who is not George Lucas and also does not have any of the previous degrees. This includes composers like John Williams, directors like Ron Howard, writers like Lawrence Kasdan, sound engineers like Ben Burtt, and any other fields that involve Star Wars in some way, because film is, and always has been, a collaborative effort. Degree 6 stars a co-star of degrees 2 through 4, or appears in a degree 1 or 5. All right, let's roll the chance cube and see what we get.
It's a 5.
It's a 5, which means we are going with Little Shop of Horrors.
Wait, which one?
The Frank Oz one, starring Rick Moranis and Ellen Green.
Oh, that one.
Yep. Stay safe, stay beautiful, happy Gay Wrath Month, and may the Force be with you.